of New England weekly broadcasts entitled Ask the Experts. Every Thursday at noon, we speak with different experts in the field of publishing in New England about a wide variety of issues affecting the publishing industry. Sometimes it's copyright law, sometimes it's finding a good editor. And today, we're very grateful to have with us today Stephen Porter of the Association of Rhode Island Authors and also Stillwater Press, who is going to be talking with us about making the most out of festivals and book fairs. Stephen, first, he has 3 books that he has published. The recent book was published. He just recently had an opening for the book, and it's about facing your fears, basically. He's also published a couple of novels. He started self-publishing in 2009, and in 2011, he founded the Association of Rhode Island Authors, which also includes some publishers, and mentioned that the distinction between publishers and authors is becoming increasingly blurred as time goes on, which is a fascinating development, in my opinion. And he also started Stillwater Publications with his wife 2 years ago. So welcome, Stephen.
Well, thanks for having me. This will be fun.
Okay, well, thanks so much for joining us. Okay, so the first question is, what would you say is the difference between a festival, a book expo, well, what else is out there?
I think that, there's a little bit of everything out there. Okay. Well, Book Fest, to me, there are really 3 kinds of events. I think that there are those book festivals that are for readers, that the attendees are coming to learn about books. They just might be fans of reading. They might be fans of different genres. You see them in conferences for science fiction and romance and mystery, and they're all over the country. Even Comic-Con, to a degree, has that written book element. But they're really for the fans. They're for the people who love to read. Then you have those festivals that are about the books, about books. It's about publishing. And the attendees tend to be more industry people. You know, on a small scale, IPNE's conference that happens every year is like that. I just got back from Book Expo in Chicago last week, where thousands of people who were book industry people were walking the floor and making deals and talking business. Then the third type of festival are those that it's kind of like all of the above. Art festivals, art shows. I've started getting involved myself in makers events. And makers events, if people aren't familiar with them, are the people, they're very popular, at least here locally, people that make things. They make jewelry, they make art, they make musical instruments, they make all kinds of different things. And I started talking to organizers and say, but we make words, we make writing, we make literature, so we should be there too. And we're local. And they think that's a great thing. We make a great addition to those kinds of events. But I also go to art shows, fairs, all kinds of fall festivals, spring festivals. And what's nice about those events is that the attendee isn't expecting necessarily to see books. So we are the exciting new sideline. And sometimes at a book festival, something like the Boston Book Festival is an example, there's just so much to look at, so many books to see, that the attendee kind of gets information overloaded after a while. Okay, great, thank you. And what does an indie author or an indie publisher, what should they do in order to get invited to the literary festivals? We've been invited to the Boston Book Festival, which we're seriously looking forward to, but there are other festivals that are not that interested in indies. What would you suggest? Well, I think the first is a question of value. I don't think anyone will ever be invited as much as you kind of have to muscle your way in. But what value do you bring that festival? Most folks who are looking forward to a festival, looking to get engaged in one, are looking at it from the other way. Like, what can I get out of that festival? And I want to be there. Now, the festival organizers are thrilled to cash your check once you send it to them. And then you get to set up your little table or your booth. But at that point, what value are we bringing them? You want them to be as excited about you being there as as they are about having it. I mean, you want it to be that kind of value. And I can remember, even in Boston, as the Boston Book Festival evolved, initially they weren't very excited about having independent authors. They had no way for a new author or self-published author to be part of the festival. And they actively discouraged them from being involved. And when organizations like IPNE got involved and could create that collaborative environment, suddenly there was value to having IPNE there. They could help with this problem that the Boston Book Festival had. And then the Boston Book Festival was very happy to let the world know that all these local independent authors were part of the festival and were here. So that I think it's that value element that's very important.
Okay, good point. Another question that's just come in is, what would you suggest that authors, independent authors and publishers do in order to make the best of the festival experience in general, both as visitors and also as exhibitors?
Well, first, I would start out as a visitor if you can. You don't want to go to a festival for the first time not knowing anything about it. I think if you go, you're going to be more successful if you visited, wandered around as an attendee. Again, if you can do it. You don't want to turn down an invitation, but if you can get there and walk around and kind of absorb the feel and the feeling for it. We do a show each year now at the Big E in Springfield, Mass., and we represent the state when we go into the show. Well, if you've never been to the Big E and you don't understand how the Big E works, it's a little bit overwhelming when I tell you that 125,000 people are going to walk by your table. And that's not an exaggeration, that's a real number. And until you realize what 125,000 people looks like, and if you're not an outwardly going person, how do you prepare for that?
Right.
So it's a good idea to go see it, see how it works, and then the next morning you're going to wake up saying, I know exactly how I want to approach that show.
Okay, great. And you mentioned earlier, prior to the interview, that you'd spent quite a few years in the old Laureate publishers, and you learned quite a bit from that experience, that you see a lot of independent publishers who haven't actually had that experience making mistakes that might have been avoided had they gotten to know a little bit more about the way the old publishing works. What sort of lessons did you learn from those experiences, and what would you suggest to indie authors who haven't had that experience?
Sure. Well, I mean, the bottom line is learn the business, understand the industry. I think that most new authors, well, we all write because we like to write, and then when we're done with our books, we have to go learn this whole new industry called publishing, which is 200 years old, has long established practices and techniques and relationships, and here you are walking in the door with your thing, expecting that the industry is just thrilled that you're there, and it actually works the other way. You know, they're not really set up to have that entrepreneur walk in the door. In fact, they're very much kind of against that. You know, the publishing industry has relationships between the writer, the printer, the wholesaler, the publisher, the distributor, the retailer. And all those relationships are 100 years old, and you're trying to insert yourself in it for the first time. So if you don't understand how all those relationships work, you don't understand how a bookstore makes its money, or how a publisher, or let's say a wholesaler, acquires books and distributes them, why would you expect that your book and your product is suddenly just going to happen?
Okay, great.
So I think the first tip is learn the business. But back in those days in the bookstores, I was at least open, because I didn't have any preconceived notions at the time, but I learned the business. I learned how all these things work and all these relationships are, how they exist, how they interact, and that when I then approached it on my own, with my own books and my own publishing efforts, even though it made it a lot easier, it was still difficult, but I at least understood what I was up against. And I think a lot of new authors and new publishers don't get that yet. They learn the hard way.
Okay, thanks. Great answer. And two questions. You mentioned a metaphor prior to this interview, which I found it really helped me get my head around the task that I see a lot of independent publishers trying to do. It really made a lot of sense to me. Could you share that with our audience, please?
Sure. If you are maybe a talented woodworker and you have a tree fall in your backyard and you go out and carve up that tree into some beautiful lumber, what makes you think you could take that lumber down to Home Depot and have them just slide all that Georgia Pacific product out of the way and put your lumber there for sale? And a lot of independent publishers, I think, expect the Barnes and Nobles of the world to do that. It's like, oh yeah, we've got all this Simon & Schuster and Random House and Harper stuff. We'll just slide it away for you. Here you go. Here's your whole new shelf. Mm-hmm. And it's just not the way it works. And even that's why you kind of get, wrinkled eyebrows when those new authors and new publishers walk into a Barnes & Noble for the first time, expecting a big hug. And they get just the opposite.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thanks for sharing that. Hold on. I'm getting a phone call that I'm not sure how to answer. Another question on the same idea. Sorry, I hope that wasn't interfering. With the rise of e-books, how important are those connections that you were referring to earlier? How important are they with the physical bookstores? Has that changed radically, or is that pretty much the same?
Oh, it's revolution. It's changed everything. The difference with the nice thing about e-books is that it's a new technology. Now, yes, it's been around now for what, 5-10 years, maybe a little longer, since they introduced Sony and then Kindle came along and all that. But it's still a new and emerging technology. And even to this day, the bookstores, at least the independent bookstores, have not got their hands around it yet. You can read in the trade magazines how much trouble Barnes & Noble's had with Nook between the devices and trying to sell the ebooks online. So there are opportunities if you understand, that readers read, and if you can get your product into their hands. It's really like no other industry. The cool thing is that those relationships aren't there yet. And it's still evolving.
Okay, great. Sorry, you're gonna.
No, I think one of the things that people forget about ebooks, which at least I find interesting, is that when ebooks first came on the scene, there was all this reporting. Oh, ebooks are going to knock paper books off they're going to disappear.
Right.
But those stories were written by a lot of people who didn't really understand the industry. They just made that assumption. And then after several years now, all of a sudden they say, hey, paper books are back. It's like, no, they're the same reporters misreporting what happened in the first place, that books never went away. Mm-hmm. And if you look at who buys an ebook, it's the same people who are buying paper books. They haven't found new markets necessarily, or they have, especially with younger people, right, and with the elderly, who can now change the point size on their Kindles of the books that they're trying to read. Right. But really, it's the same people. We've found a convenience factor for people who love to read. And people who own Kindles also have a shelf full of books in the back of them.
Yes. Okay, great.
It's the
Thanks.
same customer.
Yeah. Okay. Personally, I prefer the paper ones. I'm having a hard time switching to the digital, but I know a lot of people who love the digital ones. And the point about for the elderly having the expandable page, that's a really good point. Getting back to the topic of festivals, for authors and publishers, mm-hmm, so they've gone to the different festivals and they've got a feeling of the audience, of who goes there and the type of questions asked, etc. What would you suggest to people who have had that experience and they're thinking of their first time actually exhibiting at a festival? What advice might you give to them?
I would say, first of all, have a plan of attack. You need to know why you're going. What do you hope to achieve while you're there? Just hoping that you're going to have good results probably means you won't. What do you want to do? Do you need to be collecting information for people that stop by? Everyone who comes in the booth says, wow, what a great book. Do they have some information they can take back with them? Do you have a way to collect their information so you can follow up with them later? All those elements to it. Are you prepared with photography? Are you going to take pictures of yourself and your book there? Do you have a social media plan in place where you can tag yourself and upload yourself to Facebook and Twitter and everywhere else to say, hey, here I am at the festival. Are you also there to build relationships and network with all the people in the other tents who are also trying to achieve something at these festivals? Are you able to learn? Do you know how to sell? Because whether you're selling to a customer who wants to buy a book, to a publisher who might want to buy a manuscript, to an agent, even to a bookstore who might want to stock your material, are you prepared to sell? And I see a lot of people who go to events and they're not prepared. They're there to have a good time because they like books. What an atmosphere. Hey, look at all these tents and authors, and this is fun. This is a great time. Well, that's, it's also work. And a lot of folks will say, well, I didn't get much out of that. And I think, well, here you were in the, with 10,000 people who love books, and if you didn't get much out of it, I don't think it's the festival's fault.
That is actually a very good point. It's so easy to blame your frustrations on anything that is convenient, and something as large and amorphous as a festival is a really convenient thing.
So it's the Boy Scout. It's the Boy Scout. Be prepared.
Fantastic. I'm 4-H myself, but still, same idea. And then another question that was just sent in: what about special interest conferences and shows?
Special interest conferences and shows, such as I'm not sure I understand the question, but
okay, well, good. I don't either. I just read it on the screen. I don't know, maybe sci-fi or fantasy or nonfiction or art books. I'm not really sure.
Well, I know, like a lot of the mystery events I've been to, and one of the science fiction events I've been to, you work so hard to make your product look like everybody else's book and product because you want to fit into that scene. Yet once you get there, that's the worst thing you can do, is have books and products that look like everybody else's books and products. So once you're there, you have to differentiate. And what makes your books and your product line so different from everyone else's? Because again, that attendee's probably a little bit burned out and jaded by the time they came to see you, after talking to 200 other books and authors and writers. So what makes your book different?
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, at this point I'd like to just pause for one moment because we have two other people with us who would also like to ask a few questions, I would imagine. We have Lisa Janice Cohen with us. She was on Ask the Experts a few weeks ago.
Great.
She, series science fiction writers, fantastic author, really, really interesting books. And we also have Giselle Shardlow, who is the winner of the Book of the Year at last year's IPNE conference for a book on kids' yoga stories, which I have been meaning to read ever since I saw it at the conference. Too many books, too little time. So Lisa and Gisela, would you like to say hello?
Hi, I'm interested in this because I've taken part in some genre-specific conferences, and I'm looking towards taking part in some larger book fairs as well now. And one of the things that I found really valuable is going to a genre conference as part of a larger organization. One of the organizations that I'm a member of is called Broad Universe, which is a collective of women who write science fiction, fantasy, and horror. And that gives us something to stand out at a con. People are learning about Broad Universe, and they come and they seek us out, and that's been a really nice connection.
I think that's a great point. It also does help. One, it does differentiate you a little bit. It also gives you the impression that you're serious.
Yeah.
You know that, and I noticed that when we formed our association back a few years ago here in Rhode Island, that as other authors found us, they instantly wanted to be part of it, because it's like, okay, they're serious and they are looking at these things and they're going to help. And I think that collaboration, which I know that IPNE espouses all the time, I think has a lot of value beyond just helping each other, because it does help with that perception.
And I think when you have a table at a book fair, you have more credibility when you are part of an organization than if you're just John Smith, author, hawking their book.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay, great. Thanks, Giselle. And thanks, Lisa. I'm sorry. And
No
Giselle?
worries.
Hi. Hi, Rick. It's Giselle here from Kids Yoga Stories. My question is about if you're a children's book author, what would you recommend as some of the best expos or festivals that you would go to in person in New England?
Oh gosh, well, I mean, all of them. I don't know if I could specify a single children's event that I would go to, because children's events, one of the mistakes that I think a lot of children's authors make is going to children's events. And I say that kind of you know, tongue in cheek a little bit, because I know we had a couple of authors who signed up to do all kinds of different school and library events and children's events, and we're always getting requests to send our children's authors out to do readings at art museums or festivals. And they come back and say, well, I spent the whole day with 100 kids but didn't sell any books. It's because, well, the kids don't carry around $20 bills in their pocket. It's the adults that do. And it's the adults who not only buy for kids, but they also buy for themselves. There are more adults who buy children's books. So that I don't know of a particular children's book event. We have one here in our state, which is a festival of children's books and authors that takes place at the Lincoln School. And at least one of the good things about that festival, it is based around selling books to people. It's got a real good, very affluent community. But children's books are by far the most competitive of all the genres, and they're just so much to think about in terms of message and the illustrations and the other things. But I don't know if that answers the question real well, but at least that's my impression of the kids' books.
Yeah,
Well, interesting.
Thank you.
We have another question on the same theme, and that is it good to have props and like a dog and pony show, puppets, and things like that when you are selling a children's book?
To a point, yeah. I mean, you want to be able to catch people's attention. I think that sometimes, as long as the kind of the props or the puppets or the circus sideshow doesn't overtake the book, the product itself, I think you're in good shape. It's also a difficult thing to ask of most writers and authors too. I know the getting out into the public and being publicly active is such a hard thing for so many introverted writers to say, okay, now, and that's the worst part, I think, for a lot of writers, is that they don't want to have to market their own books. They just like to sit in their office in their basement and write and send them away and not have to worry about it. So that's a difficult thing to ask people to do, is to stand out there with the dog and the pony and the puppets and perform.
Okay, great, thanks. Another question is, what's the basic book show toolkit that you found effective? Racks, business cards, rack cards, props. What would you suggest people make sure that they have on their list of things to bring along with them?
I'd say certainly a good eye-catching banner. Lots of rain gear.
Yeah, good point.
Anything that, I know it's going to be windy and it's going to rain, so books and water don't mix.
Nope.
But we certainly have good visual signage, professionally done signage, and minimalist. It doesn't need to have. You don't want to have too much stuff. And you also want to design your booth in such a way so that people can get in and around and look at it and become part of it. You see these tables all the time. People just set up a table right at the front of their booth and stand behind it. And it sets up that barrier. You want to be able to invite people in, get them to get their hands on the book. Once they touch it, you make that electric connection, and then suddenly you have them. Making it warm and welcoming and fun and upbeat. I mean, no one's there. That's why you come to these events, is because you enjoy them. So you want to make that welcoming kind of booth. But after every book is a little different as far as collateral and things to pass out. For the most part, that stuff's going to get thrown away. And if you go to any book show or festival and take a look in the trash cans as you're wandering around, and you'll notice all that collateral and the bookmarks. It's like in the book business, even bookmarks. Every author feels like they have to have a bookmark, and I don't understand that because the 1,000 books I've read in my life, they're all stuffed with tissue paper and newspaper chunks and
Yep. No, I've found Post-it notes to be really good at just keeping that specific line where you stop reading.
Yeah, exactly.
So
I mean, really having some kind of takeaway, just one simple flyer, a simple business card that people have the information, they can follow up with you, buy the book online, go to your website, whatever you prefer they do.
Okay, that's actually the next question, and then I'm just going to turn it over to you to mention anything that you'd like that we haven't mentioned before. Like, I'd love to hear about the festival that you're organizing right now. But one quick question that someone has written in: how about getting people to sign up online right at the table? Is there a good technology for that?
It's always difficult to do. I can remember being at the Boston Book Festival when somebody tried to sign me up for their thing. And I immediately signed. They wanted this, you sign in through Facebook, and Facebook went bananas because they thought I was being attacked. And then I couldn't sign into my own Facebook account for a week, trying to figure out what was wrong with the password. It doesn't always. I think to me, it's like make it simple for the person who's there. Grab their information. Usually, people will happy to scribble it out on a piece of paper. I always have a clipboard. Join our email list. Make it as easy as possible because they don't want to be sitting there filling out information, trying to type on a computer in the bright sunshine or the dark or the rain and everything else.
Right. Okay, great, thanks. And any other comments that you'd like to make? And would you like to tell us a little bit about the festival that you're working on?
Yeah, we're doing our own. We do our own festival each year. This year, it's going to be on December 3rd. It's at a very historic building in Cranston, Rhode Island, called Rhodes on the Patuxent.
Nice.
Which is this mansion, which has been converted into a function facility, which is beautiful.
Fantastic.
Right, we have room for between 125 and 150 exhibitors.
All right.
And it'll be
nice.
We basically have all our local authors will be there presenting and exhibiting.
Cool.
We have special rooms set up for presentations. One bunch of them will be just talking about writing in Rhode Island and then different techniques, and then we'll have another line of presentations, I think, more about the business parts of it, the marketing, and for writers and for publishers. And then we have, fingers crossed by my back, a couple of marquee A-list authors who are coming to do big presentations.
Wow.
We're talking to Book TV and C-SPAN now about that, so it's coming together fast. It feels like it's right around the corner, even though December is quite a ways away, but we're busy.
Well, that's fantastic, and something definitely to look forward to. December 3rd, you said?
December 3rd in Cranston, Rhode Island. Rhodes on the Patuxent.
Okay, fantastic. That's the day of our board meeting, our annual meeting, but I think we're going to change that because that sounds like a beautiful venue, brilliant. And you're already on it. So
we got very lucky that it was available. We had to probably kick a wedding or two out, but that's okay.
Okay, great, fantastic. Well, Stephen, thank you so much for joining us. That was such an enjoyable session for me, and I'm sure that it's just packed full of the type of information that we're asked about a lot. So you've just really shared with us incredible, your unbelievable knowledge base. So thank you very much for that. And it was a pleasure talking to you.
Well, this has been fun. It's been fun. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, great. So once again, this is Karen Einstein. I'm from IPNE, the Independent Publishers of New England. On Thursdays at noon, we broadcast half-hour interviews with people who are leading in the industry of independent publishing here in New England. And today we've been very fortunate to have with us Stephen Porter from the Association of Rhode Island Authors. And so thanks again to Stephen, and thanks to everyone who joined us. We had with us Giselle Shadlow and Lisa Janice Cohen. Charlotte Pierce does all of the technical issues, deals with all the technical issues. And so thank you to everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you again next week.